Hi folks, today we're going to talk about Australia and zombie neoliberalism. Australia remains infected by zombie neoliberalism. In what sense is governing a country which is dependent upon diesel fuel to transport most essentials around, allowing foreign multinationals to pivot to LNG over oil exploration and extraction, a good idea? This is where Australia finds itself, deeply dependent upon oil imports for the fuel to run its trucking transport infrastructure. The Iran war has exposed our vulnerability, and Aussies will, once again, pay for the mismanagement of our resources by the market and by our governments. Why has this occurred? Neoliberalism. It is further proof that this hangover economic/political ideology, which tells us that the markets always know best and that governments should stand back and let them have their way, is redundant and fails the test. Australia remains infected by zombie neoliberalism despite having a Labor federal government in power. Neoliberalism has delivered gas we cannot use or afford. We are in the invidious position of not only having lots of LNG, but trucks which run on diesel. But we don't even tax this LNG properly, which is exported in huge volumes around the world. Japan, which buys our LNG on contract, gets more tax from it as it on-sells our gas than Australia does. Why is this so? Is it ineptness on our behalf by our political leaders, or something worse like corruption? The revolving door to high-paid jobs post-public service, perhaps. Yes, there is plenty of evidence to justify this. Campaign fund donations to the two main political parties by these companies extracting our LNG. Yes, these exist as well. The failure to properly tax the gas export industry has been going on for decades. It all began in 1989 in Western Australia up on the Northwest Shelf. A few facts thanks to the Australia Institute. Qatar and Australia export similar amounts of gas each year, but Qatar collects 5 times as much government revenue from its gas exports. 56% of the LNG exported from Australia is royalty-free. From 21-22 to 24-25, Australia exported $170 billion of royalty-free LNG. Gas companies have so far made $112 billion in windfall profits since the war in Ukraine began. Yet the PRRT revenue was lower in 2023 than in 2001. Since 2015, 10 gas companies have exported $165 billion worth of LNG from Gladstone in Queensland. 6 of these companies have paid zero company tax on the profits from these exports up to 2023-24. Do we really think that our political leaders in government have taken adequate care of the management of our resources in light of the facts and figures listed above? Stupid is as stupid does, Australia. The neoliberal betrayal of ordinary Australians. Australia has a population of some 28 million people. Most of them have no idea about the gas deals done on their behalf by their governments. This is why those at the top and the nefarious multinational gas companies can get away with ripping us off. Little people rarely question the actions of their faraway leaders. It is a truism of life. Now, however, we have a federal government about to boot off 160,000 Aussies with a disability from the NDIS to save money. They would rather do this than revisit the bad deals they have made with the multinational gas companies extracting our resources and selling them at massive profits. If a 25% export tax was imposed upon our LNG, it would generate around $17 billion annually for the federal government to spend on us. You have to ask yourself who these politicians are governing for and what are their base motivations in this. It begs the question, doesn't it? The abdication of governing to the market. Our governments have abdicated their responsibilities to us in favour of the market via neoliberalism. They subscribe to this outdated zombie neoliberalism where market forces make all the important decisions. Thus, we have a nation dependent upon diesel fuel, but we don't produce our own oil, and therefore we have to import it. We produce loads of LNG, but our trucks don't run on LNG. We seem to give lots of our LNG away to multinational corporations and don't charge royalties or taxes on much of it in comparison to other nations like Qatar or Norway. We are bunnies for rapacious foreign-owned companies and have likely been betrayed by those supposed to be looking after our interests. It stinks of individual Australians profiting at the country's expense, of political parties doing deals to the detriment of all Australians. Wake up, Australia, you are being ripped off royally. So, what does it mean to be Australian? I thought that it could be useful in light of the apparent rise in the populist politics of grievance to ask, so what does it mean to be Australian? Anti-immigration is the flag-waving vanguard theme of One Nation and the remnants of the Liberal Party. Blame it on the immigrant appears number one on the political grievance charts down under. Therefore, it provokes the question, what does it mean to be Australian? If it is not out-and-out racism as those on the right deny it to be, who then qualifies to be considered an acceptable Australian? One nation and no voice for blackfellas. The very name One Nation implies we all get behind a clearly defined national identity. The next logical assumption is that One Nation translates as assimilation to this de facto Aussie identity. We saw the Indigenous voice referendum defeated in Australia late in 2023. Many on the right campaigned against it on the basis of its divisiveness to a national identity. In their book, there is no room for blackfellas and sisters to hold on to their ancestral cultural identities in a modern Australia. In truth, the voice was about disenfranchised folk getting some say in their future. It was about power. That bid for empowerment was vetoed by a majority of white Australians. Who decides who is an acceptable Australian? So, who gets to decide what it means to be an acceptable Australian? Pauline Hanson? Well, it obviously wasn't Peter Dutton. Who decides? Is it those individuals flying Aussie flags outside their homes? Does that qualify you as someone who gets to make that decision? I ask, what have these folk done for their country? What civil service have they completed on our behalf? Or are they just waving flags to signal their racism and narrow-mindedness? Overt patriots have long been suspected of disguising self-interest under their enthusiastic flag-waving. It must be seen for what it is, political activism, right-wing folk attempting to co-opt our national flag for their own extreme agenda. First Nation Australians. The history of this young country is one of colonial invasion and dispossession. Blackfellas and sisters were here for some 60,000 years or more prior to a European military/convict/settler armed influx. British aggression and more advanced weapon technology defeated the indigenous populations. Since that bloody beginning, Australia has sung the praises of the pioneering spirit of the white settlers. There is no denying that courage and determination deserves acknowledgement. It has had that official recognition for some 250 years. Telling the other side of the story does not diminish that, but puts it into context. There is room within this vast continent for both stories to be told. History, like human beings themselves, is more complex than is often acknowledged. For too long, victors of battles and wars have got to define the histories of their nations. Aboriginal people were brave and strong, deserving of our and their own esteem, and their progeny are deserving of our respect going forward. This is what the acknowledgement of country is about. Thin-skinned Aussie racists and neo-Nazis. You have to ask yourself why flag-waving neo-Nazis and their ilk so begrudge these acknowledgements to our Indigenous past and present. Why are racists and white supremacists so thin-skinned in this regard? Magnanimous folk are big enough to embrace more than themselves. One Nation supporters seem the opposite, too uptight and insecure to see beyond their own reflection. Do they really want to live in a land where everybody is constrained to appear to be the same? How bloody boring. Try and visualise our great cosmopolitan cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide as wall-to-wall white bread Anglo. No restaurants except American fast food outlets. No gourmet delicatessens. No wine industry. No passionate Carlton supporters. No exotic faces to be admired. No unique perspectives to challenge and inspire us. So many wonderful sights and sounds we would be deprived of to our detriment. Australia would be so much less than it is today. Think about it. Immigration is not the real problem. Immigrants are not the problem. Populist political parties on the right have been ploughing that field forever. There are no simplistic solutions for your protest vote. The actual facts of the matter are that One Nation is backed by a billionaire oligarch who is not your friend. Right-wing parties are always funded by the big end of town. If you want to know who is stealing your lunch, it is not some poor immigrant. We're all being economically squeezed by ruthless rich folk and corporations who will not pay their fair share of tax. Workers pay tax in Australia via personal income tax and pay high taxes on their booze and bets. Billionaires and big companies avoid paying tax by means of clever accountants and helpful legislation like CGT discounts, superannuation bolt holes and negative gearing, to name but a few. Corporations only pay tax on profits, and the multinationals shift profits to tax havens via inflated IP charges to associated companies. Google does it to the tune of some $6 billion every year. Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, Pepsi, News Corp, Uber, and lots more all do it in Australia to hide their profits from the ATO. Yes, our governments are complicit in this by their inaction to do something about this. Of course, President Donald Trump is doing his dirty best to look after American multinationals around the globe by dint of his threats and mob boss corruption antics. Australian traits in the 21st century. So, what does it mean to be an Australian? In the past, we've been well known as easygoing, sports-mad folk who like a drink. Do these characteristics still hold true? Well, yes, the sports obsession has morphed into the designation as the world's biggest losers when it comes to gambling on the outcome of those contests. Sports betting is big business down under. Easygoing in that a fool and his money are easily parted according to those tight-fisted Scots. I think that the latest figures have us spending some $26 billion annually on alcohol. This could also indicate a relationship between all those losing bets and being under the influence. Despite these less than flattering aspects to our makeup, many Australians are warm and friendly folk. Indeed, we have an internally recognised reputation for spotting the inauthentic and ungenuine. Whether this is holding up under the Americanisation process will be for younger Australians to answer. The proliferation of American fast food franchises and big tech digital giants feeding us unhealthy crap is in overdrive around the place. Manipulated American forms of capitalism have been taking over the world for the last half a century, with our CEOs doing MBAs over there and the import of US values poisoning the well at pace of late. American pop culture paints a rosy picture of itself on our screens, and sophistication has long been measured on how much Aussies can ape it in their dress and mannerisms. Think about all those inflated 4x4 utes on our roads and the manosphere pumping itself up on these muscle cars of their generation. This is imported US culture on steroids. In contrast to this, Aussie younger women are very politically aware and are no fools for the trad wife BS coming out of America. The rise of the populist right on the back of a protest vote seems to be constrained to regional and outer suburban areas down under. The blame it on immigration protest vote is real, but I reckon younger metro voters are wise to the fact that this is not the real problem, but rather a band-aid reaction to the housing crisis and cost of living pressures. The growing wealth divide is at the heart of things economically, and a government that wants to survive has to address this quick smart or face the consequences at the ballot box. Things can get worse if you elect crooked populists to power. Trumpism in America has come as a dire warning about the dangers of a populist protest vote to the right. Things can get worse if you put unrestrained crooks into power. Some politician saying that he or she will address your grievance is no guarantee that they will follow through on that promise. Donald Trump has taught the right to lie shamelessly and boldly. These types will do and say anything to get into power. You need to carefully examine their parliamentary voting record and background to assess who they really are. Don't take things at face value when it comes to politics, as it requires scrutiny to get to the truth of the matter. Disengaged voters are putty in the hands of unscrupulous politicians. From the frying pan into the fire is how millions of Americans now feel after voting for Trump, with the cost of living going up and a new war started in the Middle East. Poor people and working Americans will pay for the excesses of the rich. It is happening now. Just look at the prices of diesel and petrol in Australia, thanks to Trump. So what does it mean to be Australian? For millions of Aussies, it is a functioning nation of multicultural metropolises, where we get to taste the best bits of many different cuisines and hear the sounds of exotic music at street festivals. Expanding the cultural appreciation of us all makes us better human beings. We might meet and marry Australians from different parts of the world, having families and enriching the melting pot of who we are as a nation. This is the reality of what is happening and has been occurring for many years. There is room for the complexities of who we are without the constraints of some bland concept of assimilation. Welcoming folk is the way, not indulging in hate speech. Let's focus on making people feel welcome and helping out where we can. That is what it really means to be Australian. You've been listening to Robert Sudha Hamilton. My writing's available on midasword.com.au. That's midasword.com.au. Thanks for listening.